In Austin Kleon's new book, Keep Going, he writes, "Creativity is about connections, and connections are not made by siloing everything off into its own space. New ideas are formed by interesting juxtapositions, and interesting juxtapositions happen when things are out of place." I love that quote, and it was kind of the spirit of this little patchwork sort of sketchbook that I put together. So this sketchbook was a, $4 or $5 sketchbook, and it was, I did a few things in it, a few sketches, a few little art journaling like paintings, and then I moved into and out of other projects. Well, one day I decided to pull together some of the piles of sketches and paint sketches I had, collage remnants and things that I was hanging on to for whatever reason, and start to couple them together into this sketchbook that was never going to become like a masterpiece art journal or anything like that, but to just kind of randomly put these pieces together, to start to see some of my own visual language in front of me, and not necessarily in a sequential pattern. Sometimes we have to shake up how we're looking at what we create in order to see that we actually do have some sort of cohesion and style that already happens within our work. For me, I create a lot of different things all the time. I'm switching from one project to the next. My style can look different from one day or one week to the next. But by putting these things together, I started to see these sorts of nuanced connections that were happening. And in some instances, they were from little scraps of things I had done like 20 plus years ago. Or in like this painting here, this became one that I turned into a full and finished paint study. But it all started with just a study on shapes with some black mark makers in my sketchbook, or on a loose piece of paper rather. Then there were random things from, the collage fodder boxes or bins in the studio. I've been doing a lot of landscape studies off and on for the last few years. This one is fun. This one marks a little game that we've always played. My husband's an artist too, and we have some rather creative friends. When we get together and hang out, sometimes we kind of just pass around a page and everybody adds something and we see what comes from it. It's a little silly. So there's a lot of pure randomness in this sketchbook. There's a lot of places where I could go back and even add more. There was a lovely Mary Oliver poem there, a little remnant of a poem. Things that seem nonsensical to put together, and yet they spoke something to me in the moment, or they spoke of a potential or a possibility. Just playing with sometimes the way the shape moves on the page to cut out a collage piece of an old painting and see the similarities even in the midst of difference. That page I loved doing. It was from a photograph, then to a sketch, and then it became a meditative painting for me to complete. I have a fascination and love of symbology too, and of course we can study certain symbols and things as well, but also the symbology that just speaks to us on an intuitive level. And this particular funny little sketchbook spoke to me a lot of that. Sometimes when I sketch, I'm just working with the intention of expressing a creative energy that I feel, an interest, a bursting forth, that sort of thing. And then, of course, I always seem to come back to these little portrait studies when I'm doing work without intention. There often are just portraits that pop up. This one was connected to aging and the elderly for me. And then the connection between landscapes and abstractions and abstract landscapes and all of that is a very interesting thing for me and continues to be. And exploring that in playful ways, in different styles, collages, doing it in paint, doing it with mark-making tools, pastels, things we hold in different ways. There's some of that symbology at work and a intuitive sketch happening there. Things that seem to grow from things, colors that aren't perhaps realistic. All of that fascinates me. And then the way line mimics organic life. And then here I ended with some quick figure studies that were just in that sketchbook already, and then an old art journal page. I had ruined the art journal, and so I pulled some pages out of it I wanted to keep, and they became part of this little patchwork sketchbook. So the elements, they had been in their own little places in my studio and not really relating to one another. And in order to see something new with them, to create that sort of juxtaposition and be, finding a little bit more of a surge with my creative energy and vision, I needed to pull them out of that place that they were in and put them in a new relationship, in a new place with one another, and just see how that shook things up. And some sketchbooks and art journals are the perfect place to do that. So make a little patchwork of your things and see what happens.